Welcome to The Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others.
Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Podcast Studios in Rochester, New York. Mouth off at RockVox. RockVox.com. Having enjoyed a 40-year career facilitating his own authentic brand of the helping conversation, your host, executive and recovery coach, Keith Greer.
Hello, everyone. And as always, thank you for taking the time to sit in on this episode of The Helping Conversation. I get asked all the time by folks who are just starting out in the world of coaching, what's the best way to build their coaching business? And I always start laughing when I get asked that question because I am so not an expert on that. The only thing I tell people is, and this goes back 20 plus years when I started my coach training, the first coach training or coaching course I ever took, there was this section on building your business. And I remember the instructors talking with us about finding one method of getting your message out there that you feel you're good at, that you enjoy doing, and just do that. And this was before the really big advent today of all the different social media channels and the different ways that you could get your message out there. And I knew even then, and I have lived by this to the day, that the best way for me to get the word out about what I do and who I am is to open my mouth and talk. That is the best way for me. And so I have trained, I have spoken. It is not a coincidence that I have chosen to do a podcast versus a blog because the blog would never work for me. This is what I know works for me. And that's been the extent of it. And I have found reasonable success with that. I think all the time, if I was starting out today, I would feel absolutely lost because there are so many different platforms and mechanisms. And how do I know which one is going to be the most relevant to me, the most successful for me, and most importantly, and we will talk about this with our special guest today, the most joyful for me to engage with. And I think sometimes, I know this was true for me at different times in my career, we get busy wanting to build our career or build a coaching business or a consulting business. And I wonder sometimes if we don't ask ourselves really quickly what would be joyful for me if I'm going to invest minutes into this. And so that's some of what we're going to talk about today. So I want to start with a little bit. I stole this off our guest's website, a little bit to give you a little bit of context for the conversation today. Most coaches and consultants get to a place where they want to grow and expand their business, but the fear of burnout is real. If you're looking to expand, you've most likely been asking yourself one of these questions. What's my next best strategic move for expanding the business without it taking more of my time and energy? Huge question. How can I stay in alignment and flow while I grow, have the process feel really good and somewhat natural? I always talk about, I'm one of those people who's blessed. I feel like what I do is a natural extension of who I am. And so I think about that with flow. And then what business model will serve my lifestyle best as I evolve and expand? They go on to say, sound like the convos happening in your head and heart? No worries, we can help. We help coaches and consultants grow a joyful and profitable business they love, where abundant time off is non-negotiable. And there is another statement in there that I so dig. I just laughed when I read it because it so resonates with me. And it says, we have a mantra around these parts. If it ain't joyful, we ain't doing that shit. I love that. Love that. Because, boy, we need to ask ourselves anything we invest time in, along with all the other ways we might measure whether it is an effective use of our time, right at the top needs to be, is it joyful? Do I find joy in doing this? So let me introduce our guest. Amy Hager, a true marketer and community builder at heart, uses her years of experience and expertise to help coaches and consultants around the world build businesses they love at the joyful business revolution. Amy's yoga instructor says she has lived 12 lives already because she has so many experiences. She has raced cars, been a radio DJ, built sales and marketing teams. One was for a standardized construction contracts coalition. Worked at a group home to support adults with mental illness. Led a B&B association. Started a youth group. Been a military spouse, just to name a few. Her experiences help her relate and apply strategies across many different industries by utilizing her background in marketing, communications, engagement, community development, and organizational growth. When this cat mom isn't helping clients with their joyful marketing, she can be found finding her joy while exploring her own backyard, hanging out on her boat, visiting as many wineries as possible, and are traveling the world. Please join me in welcoming into the Helping Conversation, Amy Hager. Good morning, Amy.
Thank you. Good morning. I love how we're kicking this conversation off.
It's all about joy. It is all about joy.
It is. It really is. And I think I'm at home right now, had a family wedding, and always explaining what do you do? What work do you do, Amy? It's very hard for people to grasp. And, when we talk about if you start a business and you don't build your business plan from a base of joy, why didn't you just stay at your corporate job?
Right.
Like, why would you start a business if you didn't make that choice first? And so it's kind of fun to just bring that full circle and kick it off today with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. When you read the statistics about the percentage of workers in the U.S. who go off every day to a job that they feel maybe at best ambivalent about, if not worse, it seems to be such a relevant question. And as someone who did a 30-year gig as a school social worker, most of it in high school, it's not often a question we ask kids when they start thinking, we bombard them with the whole college and career conversation. It's
right.
Not the question we lead with, and we really should be leading with that question.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a life changer when you lead that way and let go of all of those other things that we're taught and that we're brought up with and that we think we should do. And, right. What's that person going to think? Or what does my ideal client think? Where do they hang out? Who cares?
Right.
What do you think? Where do you want to hang out? What do you want to do?
Right.
And when we build our businesses from that place, it's a whole different game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. So in addition to what I shared in your introduction, fill us in a little bit more on a little bit of your journey and how you got to doing what you do today.
Yeah, so I was in the association nonprofit space, in the Washington, D.C. metro area for the better of 15 years. And during that time, when I was at the Bed and Breakfast Association of Virginia, there was this lady who was teaching B&B owners how to write blogs out of New Jersey. And so since we're not too terribly far, I invited this woman, Shannon Hernandez, to come down to my conference in Virginia and teach our B&B owners. And it was a little concerning because she's not a B&B owner. She's never been in the industry. There was a lot of doubt that this person could actually know what she was talking about. And so I stuck her in the back of the conference center in the corner, smallest room, last session. And her room was overfilled and people were in the hallway, like trying to listen in. And so I knew she was on to something good. And so ever since then, we've stayed in contact over the years. When I decided my time was done at the association world, I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I've been using everything that you taught and everything that you're using in the content personality wheel to build teams. I should probably just come coach and work with you in your business. So the last 3 years, we've been growing the Joyful Business Revolution, really expanding who we can help, because I love helping those new business owners who just started. Shannon's Jam is really helping you scale and grow to that next level of your business when you've really maxed out what you can do on your own.
Right.
And we kind of just become this awesome dynamic duo going around really helping people change their perspectives of how to run and how to start their coaching and consulting business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm thinking you right now, maybe even given some of the circumstances and forces at play in our culture, are probably not experiencing a shortage of business for the two of you. My hunch is there's a whole lot of people out there that are saying, I want to do my own gig. I'm tired of working for somebody else. I'm tired of being in a big system, in an organization, not appreciated. I have certain skills, talents, interests. How do I package that together and get out there into the world and let the world know what I'm doing?
Exactly. And I think because when you build a business, right, we're usually creating something that's in our heart, really, something that's so deep in our soul that's the driver. And so when it comes to marketing, sales, those fundamental pieces that you have to be able to do and execute on when you do start that soul-driven purpose business, that's the scary part for people. There are not everybody wakes up every day and is like, ooh, I love marketing, or ooh, I love selling. Again, it's because we've had these influences in the past of our lives where we've come from of what can really make it not fun and not joyful.
Right.
And so when we're able to really parallel what you love and how you love to serve with then how to communicate that message and how to have the largest impact and really the most conversation with people who really want to have that conversation. You know, you want to be attracting those ideal clients, not everybody, because we're not for everybody. I know I'm not for everybody. And so I do think it's an interesting conversation. We are seeing a shift. A lot of people who are taking those side hustles and hobbies and wanting them to be their full-time thing. But then we actually get to define what's full-time.
Right.
You know, I have this, and it's not an argument, but I have this conversation with my husband often because I take Fridays as a non-client day. I usually do yoga, get all my errands ran. And he's like, you know, if you worked Friday, you'd probably make more. And I'm like, I do not think so, my friend. If I worked Friday, I'd be a very, very miserable cat mom and wife.
Right.
And it's just finding that balance for you, revenue-wise, time-wise, and just working more in that space of abundance and joy instead of lack and scarcity is such a different approach than what we were brought up with.
Yeah. Yeah. I really want to echo that, that piece about viewing the world through a lens of abundance before we even get to joy, just even that concept that you know, when I have conversations with colleagues or people starting out, this fear that there's not enough business out there. And so I can't, especially if I'm talking to another coach, I have to be careful what I say to them because we're competing for the same business. And I you know, and I'm not perfect at this, but I do try to remind myself there's 18 bazillion people walking the face of the earth. I think there's more than enough business. So it sounds like part of what you do is you help people really hone that message so that of those 18 bazillion people, they're only going out after that small little group of folks who are the exact people they would love to work with and who they believe they would bring value to.
Exactly. And like when we lay it out that way, we do this in a session called your revenue roadmap. When we really think about the number of people you need to attract and enroll into your vision and value of what they're going to get with the work from you, it's not 18 bagillion people. A lot of times it ends up only being 1 or 2 or maybe 5.
Right.
And so it is really intriguing to make sure, one, that as a coach and consultant, you are priced for profit, and 2, not giving it all away for free. But then when we look at that number, it's just not so scary.
Right.
It really, when you boil it down to how many new people do you need to bring in every month, it's not 18 bagillion.
Yeah. 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 But boy, I hear that fear. I hear that anxiety when I talk with other coaches, consultants, especially folks starting out. I provide supervision for a small handful of coaches, some of whom are pretty new. And we have this conversation because they're feeling like I've got to market myself to everybody because it's the only way I'm going to find people. And when we have, and again, I'm not the expert you are, but when we have the conversation about that might not be the best strategy, never mind that conversation about who would be your perfect client. It's a really hard place for people to go.
Yeah, it really, really is. And it's like, I'll have conversations with coaches who have 14,000 followers on their YouTube channel. And they're like, oh, I do YouTube, I do LinkedIn, I do Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Oh, I'm trying out TikTok too, because that sounds interesting. And so I always ask, is it interesting or is it joyful? Are you doing TikTok because you want to and it will be fun? Or are you doing TikTok because you think that's where your ideal client is? And the last time I had this conversation with somebody, it was a gentleman out of the UK who, had 14,000 followers on his YouTube channel. I was like, how many of those followers are your clients?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, how many of them are you actually having conversations with?
Right.
And I asked him, I was like, do you actually like being on YouTube? And I didn't ask him this while we were live on his YouTube channel. I waited until he came up. And he was like, well, that's just where I can be in front of the most people. And he couldn't answer me,
right?
If it was joyful or not. If he actually enjoyed doing YouTube videos and being in that space. And so I gave it about 15 days before I bugged him again. And he's like, you've been in the back of my mind asking, is this right? Do I like this? And he's like, I actually do. But what I don't like is I don't like Twitter and I don't like having to write the things and yada, yada, yada. Right. And so he actually evaluated what he was doing and if he liked it, if he didn't, and had shifted his strategy just a little bit.
Right.
And I was like, so what about TikTok? You going for it? And I haven't heard back. So I'm like, to be continued. Dum, dum, dum.
So I'm going to come back to that because I want to talk a little bit more about some of the strategy that you do share with folks in how to move their business along. But before we go there, in your introduction, it's pretty clear that you have been in a helping space for a lot of your career, maybe in some different shapes and forms. So the question I always ask my guests is, if I knew you when you were a kid, what was going on then? Who were you? What were you doing? What maybe were some values and messages you got in your family that were pretty good indicators you were going to be in the helping field somewhere?
I love that you bring this up with your guests, and it's one of your questions because it's not one that I reflect on enough. And so thank you for reminding me about this. And so when I was younger, I grew up racing go-karts in the Midwest, and there wasn't a lot of girls back then racing. And I mean, there's still not a ton now, but at least it's a little bit more, I guess, popular. And so I always had this spotlight on me. I was well known in my community, was in the paper and the newspaper and the radio all the time. And growing up in the community that I grew up in, I was lucky enough to have that outlet, have that thing that I was really passionate about, that I really loved. And so I think I started my speaking tour when I was in middle school. I used to go around to all of our elementary schools in town and talk to the second and third graders because that's when I started racing competitively, talking about really going after your dream as a child. And not waiting until we're adults to do big things, because we can do big things when we're kids.
Right.
And shortly after that, we really started to have a problem in our community where after school, there was just a lot of crime and a lot of bad things happening. And it was because we just didn't have a place to go. Like kids didn't, especially the older ones, we didn't have, a YMCA or anything like that really at that time. And so the town got our YMCA kind of up and running and everything. And within that, I helped start this youth group. And it was really a great chance for kids who didn't have the money to play sports after school or to be in after school programs to have an outlet to come and play, foosball or pool. And we had a group that used to sing the national anthem. We've sang the national anthem up at the Timberwolves games and Minnesota, and kind of gone all around. And it was just so much fun to be able, as a kid, create these opportunities for community to come together. And I didn't realize I was building a community back then.
Right.
But more recently, as I reflect, I really, really built a community, at the ripe old age of 9, right?
Yeah.
And even when I think about my fans, and I was getting sponsors to help pay for tires and gas and, steering wheel and a new driving suit. And I remember talking to the guy who owns our Hardee's franchise here locally. And I'm a tiny little child, and this guy is a big guy. And I walk right up to Stan and I introduce myself to him. I'm Amy Woodward. And, I hear you're looking for another car to sponsor. And, here's why I think you should sponsor me. And I go over my wins and what tracks I run and how he has Hardee's in the same locations at the tracks that I'm running. And, he goes, you know what, you have a really strong following and you do such a great job attracting people and building. And I don't think he probably said building community, but really attracting a following. And I think it did not matter how many wins, how many losses, what I did, what was my track record. It was really that ability to bring people together and enjoy each other and do something either fun or do something that really bettered our community.
Right. So to me, what I hear you saying is that this was an innate quality, an innate skill, an innate way of being for you. Because that at 9, I can't, you didn't go out and read a whole bunch of leadership books. So your ability.
No. I was going to say, I have like a 4th grade reading level. I was in special ed reading classes at 9. So no, I wasn't reading. I was lucky to be reading the kindergarten books. So no, you're right. It really was an innate thing.
Yeah. And it sounds like a piece of you that to today works for you, is a gift you bring to the world, a gift you bring to the people that you work with.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, we get to meet people all over the world now. This Zoom thing is amazing.
Yeah, right.
And we don't necessarily have to travel, all over the world. So I always describe it, I love being that nucleus. And if I'm not able to serve or help you, I know from all of the connections that I've made that I either have somebody in my back pocket or I have somebody in my back pocket that will have someone in their back pocket.
Right.
And so if I can't help you or I'm not the right person to be sitting in front of you right now, gosh, I probably know somebody.
Yeah.
And having those connections and having those relationships with people from a wide variety of life. And, they all walk a different life and they all have different backgrounds and different expertise. It's just so cool.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. So fill us in a little bit more on some of the ways that you work with folks who come to your program. How do you help them figure out what is the best way for them to get the word out about who they are and in the most joyful manner? Yeah.
And I mean, even if you're listening to this and you're not a coach or consultant, again, I think this is still a great way to start figuring it out. We have a quiz. It's called the Content Personality Quiz. And a lot of people will go in taking this quiz assuming, and don't assume, just answer the questions honestly and see what comes up. And so there's 5 content personalities that we believe are live in person. The second one's written. Visual is your 3rd. So think about hand drawing, graphics on Canva, maybe photography, things like that. Video, and then audio. And so once you really know what your content personality is, and you're able then to align how you interact with people, how you talk about your business, that's the foundation of it right there. You could have the best messaging that completely lands the clients, that explains so well who you are, what you do, and it just lights up. But if you are delivering that message in the wrong content personality, the energy is not going to be there.
Right.
It's going to be very, very different. And so, here on this podcast, what I love about this is we're on screen together. I can see you. We're interacting. You can see me using my hands because I really talk with them a lot. And I think that's what makes this work for a live in-person person.
Right.
I was in radio for 7 years, and the only way I think I got over the hump of being in that room by myself for 5 to 6 hours a day, just jibber jabbering about whatever, is an old timey DJ told me to begin with. You've got to imagine that your best friend is sitting on that other side of that mic and you're having a conversation with them.
Right.
And so every single time I hit that mic and went live, that was the only way I could do it. I couldn't just talk or read off the soybean report off the page. And so really embracing what that content personality is going to be the start of your work. And then we really focus on working on your messaging. It's clear that you've really identified what and who your ideal client is. And the why behind the ideal client is always really, really important too in our journey. And then once we've really got those pieces together, you're attracting the people. How the heck do you sell them?
Yeah.
Well, it's not selling, it's conversations. And so we really work through what's a conversation that you want to have with your ideal client, because you want them to have, we call a whole body yes. And so you don't want to overwhelm them. You want to make sure it's clear what you're doing and how you can help. And so we really work through that with you. And everybody's a little bit different. We have the foundation of kind of what we believe in, but the words that are probably going to come out of your mouth are going to be different than the words that are coming out of my mouth. And we both do, coaching and consulting, but we really focus on a different area, and our expertise is just very, very different. And so it's not that you're going to get a script and it's going to be my script and I'm going to give it to you. We're going to create the outline and the words for you and your business so that it really, really does align. And so that it does bring you joy. Yeah. And so it does feel comfortable and like you're just having a conversation with your best friend.
Right. I love that you say that. I'm sure you can imagine this. There's times I'm talking with people who we're exploring potentially being a guest on the podcast, and they express, some level of anxiety about talking. And I will often say to them, look, here's the deal. You and I are simply having a cup of coffee and we just happen to have microphones in front of our face. I mean, that's it. We're just sitting down and having a chat for 60 minutes. And that does seem to cause people to relax a little bit. The other thing I just wanted to comment on, because I think I hear this all the time, is with coaches, I work more with coaches than consultants, is there's almost this question in their head when you raise this topic of like your perfect client. How do you find your perfect client? There seems to almost be this question in their head about, is that okay to do? Is it okay for me to think that way? Because I should be out there wanting to help everybody. Yeah. And it's always fascinating. Exactly. And I know how long it took me to get there.
People. Yeah, you can't help no one if you're helping everybody.
Yeah.
And so the other thing too that I think happens, and again, it's just such a beautiful situation, is when you are that crystal clear who your ideal client is, where they are in their life journey and whatever it may be, you're going to, attract those. But then you do start attracting, maybe we'll say a sub-ideal client or that, 6 degree of separation ideal client, because you're so clear on your messaging. So a lot of times we get the question of, do I even qualify to work with you? And I love when people ask me that question, because they're so intrigued in what we do that they want to be a part of the club as well. And so opening up that conversation and having it with them so that they know if it's right for them or not to be working with us. And so I don't say yes or no. It's a full-on conversation, because I want them to be as enrolled at the end of me answering that question as they were as curious when we started that conversation.
Right. I'm curious what the conversation is like with the folks you work with around what they charge, because my experience has been that for many of us in the helping work, like I always joke as a social worker. So my education background, I'm a clinical social worker, and I worked in the clinical side of things for many years. And I always joke that, the message I got growing up in my field was, I should be out there helping everybody for $1.50 an hour, and I should be happy with that. And I know the difficulty I had when I started my coaching business, giving myself permission to even think about, how do I attach value to what I do that is measured in dollars, right? It just is. So I'm curious what your experience has been with folks, if you find that is a really challenging conversation at first for people.
I don't think challenging, but I do think that there is this concern. And so when that, again, is the first session, the first thing that we do when you come work with us in the Joyful Business Revolution, whether you're in a group program or in a one-on-one program, we really look at what you're charging, how many people you want to work with, what revenue you need to bring in,
right.
What revenue do you want to bring in. It's the good, better, best theory, right? And so when we really look, and I have people who come work with us who've been in business for 10 years and have never paid themselves. And I was like, how have you been operating for 10 years and you've never been able to collect a paycheck?
Right.
And so when we look at those numbers and really sit with them and break it down, so that way we can determine what their pricing structure should be. I think the beautiful thing that can happen is when you get things running right, when you are attracting your ideal clients, and when you're at that good, better, best number,
right,
or even that good number, a lot of things that we talk through with people is, have you ever thought about developing a scholarship program for people to work with you? And that's what Sheena and I do. Every quarter, we look at what we brought in. We look if we met our good or our better number.
Okay.
And then from there, we take, we put some money into, and we have a foundation.
Right.
And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll offer scholarships, and, they're partial scholarships to work with us. But those who do really financially need the help are the ones who are reaching out to us then. And if there isn't anybody who takes the scholarship or, utilizes the opportunity, we have a program that we donate that then, is a school for women in Africa. And so no matter what, we know those funds are going to good.
Yeah.
And we've launched our own podcast in this last 6 months or so. And it's the Grow Your Business for Good. And like good is all capital letters, GOOD.
Right. Yeah. Social consciousness.
Really do believe that it's not donating to, causes and things like that, but could you have a scholarship program for your business? And if so, what would that look like? But you're never going to get there if you're not taking care of yourself first.
Right.
If you continue to put the clients, if you continue to put the community, if you continue to put everybody ahead of you, you're never going to actually get to that level to achieve what you're really striving to.
Right.
And so it's an interesting first conversation to have of what do I charge? How many clients do I need? What my monthly revenue needs to be, and making sure that all of those are coming from logical but joyful places.
Yeah. It strikes me as I'm listening to you, and I don't think this is just relevant to those of us in the coaching and consultation space, the difficulty many of us human beings have giving ourselves permission to think big about ourselves. And to then act on that, and to not feel that that's selfish, or I'm full of myself, right? Or I'm conceited, or I'm better than. It's just permission to think big about ourselves. So on Amy's website, there is something called the Confident Expert Manifesto, which I just love. And it talks about to stop hiding. When you use your voice, your life will change. But there's another statement on there I wanted to ask you about, because it's related to my next question. On this manifesto, there's a statement that says, the scary truth is that you speaking up makes you vulnerable, and being vulnerable isn't easy. And so as I was reading that, Amy, I found myself thinking, you are the person, as one of the coaches, that engages people in this really vulnerable conversation. The level of vulnerability and intimacy involved in a conversation about a business I want to give birth to, about finances, how difficult that conversation is for some folks. So one of my really big interest areas in our work as coaches is when we are in those intimate, vulnerable conversations with people or about to enter them, what we do to make sure that we have created and are holding a safe and trusting space. So talk a little bit about how you do that, what you think about as you enter those intimate conversations with your clients.
Yeah. And, again, I think it comes naturally for me to do this. Right. And so when I think about breaking it down to really explain it, one, it is building that common connection with somebody. And it really starts in that very first conversation I have with them. And sometimes conversations happen on a Facebook thread. Sometimes they happen in private messenger. Sometimes they happen in an email. Sometimes they happen in a Voxer, a voice, conversation. Yeah. But again, always making sure that the question or whatever they come to with me first to enter in that relationship, that I am just open, but also I don't have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And so if we open it up so it is a conversation right away, because I'm not going to have the answers because I don't know you well enough. I need to get to know you really well. And so even in, once we get to the point where I'm having sales conversations with people, I think the beautiful thing about what I do is I'm seeing somebody from the very beginning. I'm the person who has the sales conversations at the Joyful Business Revolution.
Right. And
a lot of times I end up being the coach as well. So being able to be on them through that whole journey, we build a really, really great relationship.
Yeah.
And there are times where I'm asking them very, very deep questions, but I'll say that before I ask them. Yeah. I'll make sure that they're ready for it, that they're comfortable with it. And if they're not, it's okay. And I can tell, do they tense up? Do they, there's a lot of crying sometimes in these conversations because I really do want you to dig deep and find out what's in your heart. What is holding you back?
Right.
And once we really uncover that, then it's so much easier to, as a partnership, unpack it and go along. And I think, Shannon and I really focus on making sure people realize, Shannon's very much so an introvert and her energy is going to be different than my extroverted energy. And that we're both here to support you. And when you're able to connect as deep with one or even both of us, that's really where the magic happens.
Right.
But it's a lot of conversations. It's not that it just happens overnight.
Yeah.
And when we have our group sessions, we keep our groups small because you're going to get to know each other on a very deep level. There's a lot of things that are going on that just isn't marketing, messaging, and selling.
Right.
And so when we're able to create that safe space, set the stage at the beginning of our group conversations, and because I know everybody pretty well and very intimately, I know I've got a couple people who are scared in those group situations.
Yeah.
One of them, it's because her last name starts with a Z. So she always came last growing up when we had to do the alphabet stayed in line.
Right.
And so she will never speak first. So there's times where I hold that space and I'll ask her privately, hey, do you want to go first today? And you can just tell it really breaks down that barrier that she knows that I care that much to ask her to go first because she's a Z in the alphabet.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I need to ask you something. This is something I'm personally interested in. I'm curious what your answer to this will be. So one of the ways I always think about coaching is that when and most of my work, I'm coaching. Sometimes I act as a consultant. So I'll give you my definitions of those two because it sounds like you do both, and I'm curious how you balance it. So as a coach, when I'm in a conversation as a coach, I don't have anybody's answers. Right? I don't know what's best for them. I'm listening deeply. I'm asking really good questions. I'm bringing curiosity into the room. I'm creating that trusting and safe space. I'm doing all of that, but I don't know. I have a stance of I don't know. Mm-hmm. consultant is often seen as the person who does have some answers, does have some specific expertise, can share with you, here's some things I think would work. And my sense in this conversation with you is you occupy both spaces. And I'm curious if you would agree with that. And if you do, how you balance both of those conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And if I think about how the conversation goes, we're kicking it off with a lot of questions so I can figure out what the situation is.
Right.
We're giving my 2 cents, right? But then at the end of that conversation, we always talk about what's the next best steps for you.
For you, right.
And so if my suggestion makes you squirm and it's not joyful, then don't do it just because I said to do it, right?
Right. So there's
and
that
so
autonomy.
We really talk through again.
Yeah.
Yep. What would you enjoy? What don't you enjoy? Are you willing to just give something a try because you don't know? And sometimes that's the answer.
Right.
And so making sure that I'm asking, ask better questions, get better answers.
Right.
We're asking really great questions, digging, and really thinking through what then I could suggest. And if the suggestion isn't aligned for them, or if it's not quite right for them, what do we do to tweak it to make it right for them?
Yeah.
And, I think a great example that I actually can give you is I have a student who, when she joined our program, was the day she gave her notice at her job. So she's been transitioning out of a 25-year career, and she really focuses on trauma and coaching people through trauma kind of after they got out of therapy. And, of course, she's here to get help with her messaging, marketing, and sales and everything. But everything I'm hearing from her in the last week is how burned out she is, how she just can't wait to be done with this job. She just wants to move on. She's not sleeping and all these things. And so when we got on our session yesterday, she came in thinking I was going to be talking about her sales page because that's what she launched. But because all she said to me in the last 2 weeks in our accountability coaching forum were these things, I asked her if she slept well last night. And so instead of talking about her sales page in our session yesterday, we really talked about how she needs to start building a better schedule for herself because she owns it. It's no longer the organization that she works for. It's hers. And she didn't think we were going to start out with that conversation yesterday. And we got to the sales page and it looks really good. She really did a fabulous job with it. But I think the key to being a really great coach is to listen to what they're saying.
Yes.
And continue to ask and dig deeper.
Yeah.
Because you could follow, we have our processes and everything like that. You could follow that every single time. But I think if they are not emotionally in the right place, if they are not well rested in the right place, then any of the work that we're doing after that is just not going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we really got to make sure that they're building in that rest and abundance of time off into their schedules.
Yes.
So sometimes we have to start there and not necessarily with their messaging.
Right. But I loved what you said a couple of minutes ago about that even when you share a thought or a suggestion or an experience, it's up to the other person in the room whether they want to take it. As you said, it might even to them sound like it came from outer space. And I always want to highlight that in the conversations I have on this podcast as helping people. And this would be true whether you're in the coaching space or the consultant space, is that piece about treating people with autonomy, that it's their life, their decisions, their choices. It does not mean that we cannot share our thoughts, our experience, our wisdom, but we share it in a way, you highlighted it wonderfully, that you share it in a way that the other person in the room, our client, knows they have permission, so to speak, to say, Keith, I don't know where that came from, but it doesn't resonate for me. It doesn't land for me. All right, cool. We move on because our role is we leave our ego at the door. It's not about us. And it's just such a wonderful way to be in a conversation with someone where at the end of the day, they know they are empowered to make the final decision.
Right, exactly. And I think when I reflect back 3 years ago when I joined the brand and came on board, and there were at the time, like some people who were scared to go to my coaching partner and say, I didn't do what you suggested because they didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's unpack that. Like, why?
Yeah.
And, it's again, the view of authority and everything along those lines. But also what I do know about the people that we tend to attract and work with is they don't ever want to upset another human.
Yeah.
And we very much so have that empath kind of thing about us. And so talking through that and accepting that it's okay to make the decisions that feel right for you and your business, especially right now, and going forward, you always should be making the decision that's right for you, but also making sure that you're right. We hold that space so that they're comfortable saying no. Yes. They're comfortable saying, I don't want to try that.
Yeah.
And so really it's a dance, right?
Yes, it is.
It's a delicate dance. And I think we've grown and gotten better at keeping that space open so that people can say, that's not for me.
Right. I always think of this quote from one of my favorite books is this book called More Time to Think by Nancy Klein. And it just explores what we need to do as thinking partners. So you think of coach or consultant and their client, your thinking partners. And there's a quote in the book about that the brain that contains the question usually contains the answer. And I love that because it just reminds me that when my client is asking the question, I should not be so quick to answer it and think that my answer is the answer. They need to answer it. Mm-hmm. And that they do know. They know what's best for them.
Right. And I think then it puts it back on us to continue to ask better questions.
Yeah. No question. Right. Yeah. That's it. Ask good, open-ended, thoughtful questions that tap into people's wisdom. Right. Yes. Yeah. So it sounds like very much that you are one of those folks who is very strength-based with people. You see the best in them. You help them identify their capacities and their skills and their talents in moving their business along. So I always ask and give my guests here an opportunity to demonstrate being strength-based in that here's a moment for you to share what are some of your strengths, talents, skills, positive attributes that you either bring to your business or that you bring to your personal life. What's awesome about Amy?
I feel like you nailed it. Like, I would say that, I'm very optimistic. And I do think life throws us big curveballs and little ones. Mm-hmm. And it is so much easier to go through those curveballs in a community than it is by yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that has taken me a very long time to really, I don't want to say master, but embrace and realize. And so when I think about business owners, when I think about, even my mom, I'm here at my parents' house, making sure that because I'm not around, I can't take care of her. And her other daughter's a few hours away, making sure that you build a community who's going to love and cheer you on when you need that, but who's also going to call you out on your shit and give yourself a little kick in the booty every once in a while too.
Right.
So finding those people in life and in business, I think is really, really important because doing this life journey alone is not what we were put on the earth to do.
I agree with you. Yeah. And we see that, right? We see that all around people who are just going at this isolated, do not have people in their life that they can talk to and get support from. And yeah.
So I think if I think about my biggest strength, it really is being optimistic, being that person who can be a cheerleader and a butt kicker,
right?
But also helping others realize that they need to build that community that's right for them as well.
Yeah.
And again, giving them the questions then they need to be asking themselves.
Right.
And thinking through. I have a really close friend right now who's really wanting to go through a job transition. And she went at it originally as you would do any wanting to leave a job. And I was like, can we pause? And let's ask yourself, what would your ideal work week be? Who do you want to work with? Like, do you want to work with kids? Do you want to work with adults? Why?
Right.
And really allowing her to ask herself questions about her own life, having that person to sometimes pause you because you get so wrapped up in your own rat race. So cool and important.
Right. So you have talked about, and I know this is a part of your program of people figuring out how to do this business and do it joyfully, but also do it that honors time in their life. So I'm curious with you, as someone who sounds like you're pretty busy, and although you have shared already that you make sure that you take Fridays off, which is awesome. What are some other things you do in your life to take care of you?
Yeah, that is such a good question. So, throughout my entire life, it's so funny because, I did morning show radio. I used to work the overnights at that group home. Like, I've had a very wonky schedule always. And so when I was presented with this opportunity to set my own schedule, one, I didn't know what the heck to do. It took me a little while to figure out.
Yeah.
But what I've really, really noticed is if I can slow start my day, have a cup of coffee, cuddle the cats, usually watch a little bit of, the Today Show or a news program. I, again, grew up in radio and TV and love the news, which is not for everybody.
Right.
But I've noticed if I slow roll my day and I don't start interacting with humans until about 10, the rest of my day is just so awesome.
Yeah.
And so I'll check emails, just kind of get the things out of the way that need to get out of the way. I always make sure, again, I'm responsible for the sales in this brand. So I make sure every single day I'm spending 30 minutes doing something that is a revenue generating activity. And once 10 o'clock rolls around, that's usually when I have my first client, my first Zoom, or I will put a block of time in my calendar to tackle a big project. And then really I try to wrap up by 3:30 because I know if I keep going, I'm just going to be dragging.
Right.
And I'm going to want to go to bed after I get off, Yeah. So I always make sure that I end around then. That way I have about an hour to recheck emails and make sure that there's nothing else that needs my attention for that day. I check in with my team. I say, this is my last hour. Do you need anything from me today? And then, the one thing that I have found, especially when I'm at home, my schedule, because I work from my home, I go to yoga because I needed that separation of my work day to my home day.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just so easy to open up the laptop and do more emails.
Yeah,
it's so easy to sit there and chat up on Facebook, right? And so I found that schedule has worked really, really well Monday through Thursday. But then when I'm on the road, like I am this week, I'm staying at 6 people's houses over the next 6 days. I started earlier today with you because I knew I wanted to have the afternoon to spend time with my high school best friend and her 4 kids on their farm. We're going to go play in the mud, I think. So, I'm starting my day early because I know I can have the rest of the afternoon off and do what I really want to do. And so I don't always stick to that 10 a.m. schedule, but when I'm in my routine and I'm at home, I have found when I stick to that and really give myself grace in the morning and do what feels right. And sometimes it is, I just need to go out for a walk before I kick my day off. Yeah. So sometimes I'll do that.
Right.
But I really ask myself, what do I need right now? And then go from there.
That's great. That's great. What great permission to give yourself to do that, to not recreate the traditional 9 to 5 or longer. I bet a lot of people do, even when they're working in their own business. We've talked about joy this morning. So what would you say are some of the most joyful aspects of your work?
I love that. I love to ask people, what are the most joyful moments in the day? And I do think it is like kicking my day off, pouring that first cup of coffee, putting a little bit of oat milk in there, and just like having that first sip and just looking out the windows, because we've got these really great windows at my house that overlook the lake. So that's how I want to kick off my day. When I think about the most joy that brings me in my work, I really, and I know all coaches and consultants feel this way, it's the transformation that you get to watch as a coach and a consultant that your people have. And because I have an accountability system built into the coaching program that we do, every single week I'm seeing small transformations to large transformations. And right now, I actually have a client who's a hairstylist. And when she started, she was just really, really struggling with having people in her chair. And so we really put a focus on her healing hair. Fast forward, we're now 7 months, and her reflections are just absolutely amazing. So seeing that personal transformation for this woman and seeing her personal reflections. And I think at the end of the day, I know that if I can help this person get their message out, the vibration of the planet is going to be higher.
Yes.
Because the people that we help do such amazing things.
Yes, they do.
And so to just have the opportunity, the honor really to work with these people. Yeah. And we say you kind of become a part of a family. And, you know, sometimes we're your pain in the butt cousins and sometimes we're your best aunt and uncle. But you know, it really is this extension. It really is this business family. And again, that building that community and that pod that really love and support you and give you the kick when you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that word honor, because it truly is a wonderful way of describing what it feels like to be in that conversation with another human being, that they are allowing us, they are inviting us into this, again, very vulnerable, very intimate space. Maybe I've had this experience over and over again in my career where I know something just got shared with me that has never been shared with another human being. I can't think of anything else that feels more honorable to me, right? To share that with me than those kinds of moments. They are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It's like, you know, you have all these children and it's seeing those first steps. It's seeing them eat their first meal, their first cheeseburger, right? And, you know, when I think about those moments that I have with clients, like I know I'll never have that moment with them again. And we talk about this a lot too. You're never going to launch a business again. You're never going to launch this specific program again. Right. And so really honoring and reflecting and enjoying those moments as well. It's such a great journey.
Yeah, it is. It is. Amy Hager, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. It's been a phenomenal conversation.
I totally agree. And I appreciate being able to spend time and just kick my day off this way. So this may have to be my new favorite way to kick my day off instead of the cup of coffee in front of my window.
There you go. There you go. It is, you and your colleague are in the middle of such important conversations, again, in helping people manifest what they want to manifest, think big about themselves, bring wonderfully valuable, important services to their community that make their communities a better place. And so I honor what you and Shannon do. It's some pretty phenomenal work and really important work. And again, thanks for making the time to be here. I've really enjoyed the hour.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to make sure that in the podcast description, you will find Amy's website and any other contact information that she will pass along to me. If you felt yourself being described today as you were listening, thinking about starting a business, have already given it a shot, feeling tentative, boy, I support you and urge you to give Amy a call and see how her services might be able to be of support to you to make this happen. Don't just sit on it and not make it happen. Do not give in to that anxiety and fear. Make it happen and reach out and
really, to be honest, any of any of the listeners, if you just Google content personality quiz, it's going to pop up.
There you go.
And I'd be so interested to see what the results are and see. That's the first step. That is absolutely first step. So even if you don't want to reach out to me and you just Google and take the quiz, go there first and really uncover what's right for you and what aligns for you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I took it and I took it as open-minded as I could, and it told me what I think I kind of knew, that this is the platform for me. Speaking live
Exactly.
is the platform for me. It validated what I think has worked for me relatively well through my career. But definitely go check it out. So I hope you have found this to be a helpful conversation. I sure did. Again, please reach out to Amy if you think she could be of service to you, and don't sit still. If you have a vision for where you would like to be and where you would like to go with your business. Thank you for listening to us, and I invite you to join us again as we continue to shine a light on the skill and talent of those individuals that invite another into that compassionate, complex, and intimate space called the helping conversation. Have a great day, everyone.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the Helping Conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. For more information on Keith Greer and this podcast, log on to keithgreercoaching.com. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the Helping Conversation.